welcome everyone. Today, we're going to talk about nonprofits and their really important and essential role for artists. Because nonprofits do a lot of things throughout the world. In Europe, we're talking about non-governmental organizations, ministries of culture produce nonprofit events. And today, we're going to talk about specifically how they can impact an artist's career in really in a huge way. So to begin with, nonprofits, it's a little known fact, or maybe some of you know, that the way the artist is chosen for the Venice Biennale in the United States is, and that's one artist, in other words, for those of you who don't know what that means to be represented at the Venice Biennale. It means that you're the one artist that represents your country, wherever that is in the world, and many countries are participating in the Venice Biennial. So from the United States, the way that works is one artist has to be picked from the United States. And when the committee that's partly funded by the National Endowment for the Arts gets together and decides who is this artist going to be that's going to represent the United States for the Venice Biennial, they look to nonprofits in the United States that they ask for a few artists that they would recommend to be potential representatives for the United States. One year, that was the Bronx Museum of the Arts, for example. It's, a small museum that does great things, but, it's a nonprofit. They ask other nonprofits like Creative Time and different ones throughout the United States to put forward a few artists. The reason they ask nonprofits, the reason the government asks a nonprofit to please suggest some artists for the Venice Biennale to possibly represent this country is because nonprofits aren't there to make money off artists. Their role is educational, exclusively. A museum is a nonprofit. An alternative space is a nonprofit. Many art centers are nonprofits. There are places that just produce public art. They're nonprofits. And the role of nonprofits is enormously important with what I'm just telling you, this one example of that's how people get into the Venice Biennale, who are representing their country. But that's also an incredibly lofty goal, right? So let's just talk about the other roles for nonprofits, for artists, and why it's important to be in one. Well, again, nonprofits are alternative spaces, art centers, museums, small museums, any place that has a nonprofit status that is advocating for the arts in some way. It could be theater, performance, sound, all kinds of things, dance, music of any kind. So once they have nonprofit status, that essentially means their role is educational, purely educational. And so the nonprofit is important for artists because all these places are accessible to you. In most cases, they're not going to cost anything to apply to. And when you get into a nonprofit and have an exhibit at a nonprofit, it's a certain kind of real recognition because it's all merit-based. It's not how much you spent applying to them. It's not who you know because it's jury-based. And it's not about whether or not your work can sell because they're there just to have good shows and educate the public on what good art is. So just as in the Venice Biennale, the government asks a few nonprofits to put forward a few artists, gallerists often find artists through nonprofits. And, the nonprofit could even be something like a studio complex. There's some in the Midwest, all over the place, Wisconsin, everywhere, where artists form a nonprofit group, often with a kind of a board, and they turn a building into an active space of artist studios and exhibitions. So that's one way that artists often generate a nonprofit. And so gallerists come to these spaces, alternative spaces, artists run spaces, like I just mentioned, as well as, of course, small museums and other types of music venues and theater performance venues that are nonprofit to look at the artists. And why? Because a gallerist can walk into those spaces and feel comfortable there and know that the show they're putting up is based on a curator's ideas that are interesting, and they're looking at artists that in many cases you haven't heard of or aren't known quantities. So So they're very important, not only to have exhibits, but also to get discovered by gallerists and possibly put on very important lists for consideration. Now, I want to talk about another aspect of nonprofits, which is it's your tribe, it's your community, right? This group, being a member of Praxis Center, is also a tribe, right? This is your tribe. Everyone's an artist here. There's artists from all over the world. There's artists from Europe and the U.S. and Asia, all over the world. This is your tribe. But to find your tribe locally is also very important. This tribe gives you support in one way through questions asked in the groups, things edited that you're working on, your statements, other things. And of course, there's resources here like lists of nonprofits, where to find them, and more. So this is one of your tribes. But the other tribe is the nonprofits around you and the community of artists that they generate. And so you may be thinking about, I don't know where the nonprofits are. Maybe I'm looking at the wrong ones. And maybe you are. So if you're in the United States, the way to find the nonprofits is you go to your local council on the arts. You have a state council on the arts and you have a local council on the arts. Those are both nonprofit organizations, by the way, and they're meant to serve artists. So go to the local nonprofit on the arts, or ask the state one if you can't find that one, and ask them for what nonprofits are around. If you're in Praxis Center, you can ask me. There's resources here for that. But essentially, when you find the nonprofits around you, and there'll be things like alternative spaces, there'll be things like theaters, there'll be things like public art organizations, there'll be things like, music halls, places that are centers for art, maybe largely visual art, but also quite a bit of the performing arts. When you find some of these nonprofit spaces around you, go to them, go to the openings, meet people there. This is your tribe. They are local. They are artists. They're artists who are interested in great art. They're artists who are interested in sharing ideas that have something to say. They're serious artists, in a word, right? Now, the same thing in Europe. In Europe, whether you're in Germany, Spain, England, throughout the world, really, there's biennials in almost every country. You can find out where the biennial is or has been in your country. Almost every country has one. There definitely are a few that haven't, but certainly throughout Europe and Eastern Europe and even in the Middle East and Asia, there's an awful lot of representation at the biennial now. So essentially in Europe, you can go to the Ministry of Culture. There's and you'll learn more there about the many alternative spaces and nonprofits that are around you. And again, today's talk on nonprofits is for really to deliver two pieces of information. One, it's about finding your tribe, right? You found one tribe, and that's here in Praxis Art Center as a member, and you can dialogue with me and other people in here. But also, there's the tribe that's local to you wherever you live. And that tribe is found by going to nonprofit art centers. And that's where you should be exhibiting as well. I know you might have a gallery or you're looking for a gallery, and that's excellent. By all means, pursue galleries. But nonprofits are a way for you to hook up with not only the local tribe, but it's a way for you to exhibit without paying for it, and having the ability to be, quote unquote, discovered. Because nonprofit centers are where gallerists go to look for artists. It's where other curators go to look at artists. It's a wonderful atmosphere for curators and gallerists to go to, because nonprofit exhibitions are all merit-based. It's not about a jury. They have a jury, but it's not about who you know, and it's not about the cost to get in or anything like that. These are merit-based exhibits. So that's the story, and very, very important to think of. So I'm just going to recap, tell you a little bit about what I just said. And of course, you can ask me questions in the group. I'll answer them at the end. If you're hearing this recorded, you can still ask me questions. So essentially, nonprofits are organizations, and in Europe, NGOs, non-governmental organizations, also called nonprofits. They're organizations that have a tax-deductible status from the United States or the participating country, and that means that their purpose is essentially educational. And for you, that means these are venues that you could apply to, that have open calls, and that look at work on a merit-based system. So they want to know what you're making, and they look at it, and they're giving you an exhibit based on the merit of your work. You're meeting your tribe there. It's a place where you can build a community and feel supported. It's also a place where gallerists discover artists, and curators discover artists. Enormously important aspect. And it's also the place where even something like the Venice Biennale looks for who is the next artist to represent your country wherever it is in the world. So that's what's really important. For those of you who are members, of course, ask me questions. I'm here to answer them, and resources, if you need pointed in the right direction, ask me. That's what I'm here for, and great to have you all here. You know, the group's been very active. Everybody's been very active, and it's great to see the tribe so supportive of one another. So thank you all for that. And I'll answer your questions in a moment, but I want to thank you all for being the great active members that you are. Thank you. Okay. Yes. So let's see. Steve, Jane, Tonia, Lisa, Melissa, Monica. Welcome here. Any questions from you guys? You can ask afterwards. I don't see any right now. But if you guys have questions afterwards, let me know. I'm here to answer questions. But nonprofits are really important, I think. Okay, Kathleen says, last time I watched a video about this, I've talked about this before. She called the Massachusetts Cultural Council, and they called back, and we had a great talk, told me about a few, and then emailed me with a whole list of nonprofits within a 100-mile radius. Okay, so that's what Kathleen just said. She, called the local state council, right, Massachusetts Cultural Council, and they gave her a whole list. So, so perfect. That's exactly the idea. And then you can go through that list. They're not like gallerists. They're not going to be difficult to reach. So let's see. Yeah, any suggestions in New York City? New York City's loaded. New York City's loaded, Antonia. Same thing. You can even type in and put something here, but New York City nonprofits, New York City art nonprofits. You'll see things like Creative Time, Lower Manhattan Cultural Council are big ones, Public Art Fund, Elizabeth Foundation for the Arts, that provides studios. I mean, there's all kinds of, New York is loaded with them. So yeah, Antonia, New York City, lots and lots of nonprofits, and the same thing, call the Cultural Council on the Arts, and you just like Kathleen was saying, you can discuss with them all kinds of things about what's going on, and or just get a list. But you could also search online, and Antonia, simple enough to get what's happening in New York City online. And they're great to go to also, again, build your tribe in New York City. There's nonprofits in Brooklyn, and these are artist-run centers, as well as organizations like Shashama, again, LMCC, a Public Art Fund, NYFA. These are all big ones. New York Foundation of the Arts is NYFA. LMCC is Lower Manhattan Cultural Council. So, New York City is really my tribe. So, but we're in a global tribe here. We're artists, it's a global tribe because artists can have an international reach pretty easily. So, so Jane says, advantages to approaching nonprofits that are local or not. I live in Santa Fe. Approaching nonprofits in New York City? Absolutely, Jane. Different nonprofits have different requirements. So some in New York City, if you're approaching LMCC, or in other words, and it's not so much approaching, you're applying for an open call. They have open calls. So let's say you apply for something like the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council's studio program. That would mean you'd have to come to New York to participate in that program. Is the only, this is where you're exhibiting, so you have to be here. Some of the programs are limited to residents in New York because they want to make that easy for you. One way around that is to find someone who is a resident in New York and potentially use their residency status if you can stay with them for a while, like while you're doing a residency or something like that. But absolutely, you can reach out to nonprofits in any state. Just look carefully at what they require, because sometimes it's just for residents only, and other times it's for anybody can apply. So yeah, so there's a lot to look through, of course, but yeah, that's a good question. So Jane, do I have to live in New York City in order to make use of New York City nonprofits? Good question. Like NYFA. NYFA is New York Foundation of the Arts. In some cases you don't, in some cases you do. Creative Capital is another one. These are super competitive, by the way. They just, because they're the biggest ones in New York, they tend to be jammed with artists. But Kathleen, they have seminars and kind of talks about things like a variety of things that you can attend. And in many cases, yes, you can apply to them. Just look through whatever's coming up there. NYFA has a good amount of resources. They have opportunities that I combed through as well and send to you guys. But yeah, absolutely make good use of. You can make use of those in New York as well. I'm pretty sure Public Art Fund and others. You don't have to be a New York resident, but just check the requirements on it. Okay, so welcome again, everyone, to be here. You can always ask me questions afterwards. I'll be talking at least every Friday on different topics. If you have a topic that you want me to address, put it right here and I'll address it. I'll make a video on it and you can ask me live questions on it, and so can everybody else. So you can also, of course, catch this as a recording afterwards and just ask me questions right here in the closed Facebook group. Again, it's great to have you guys here. You know, this is a tribe, right? And the nonprofit galleries and organizations are also your local tribe. You know, but this is we're in a global group as artists, because the work translates across borders. It communicates as a message that can reach, in many cases, any culture. So so great to see you guys, and I guess that's it right now. Yeah, Antonia's saying Creative Capital, right, has an open call now. That's due February 28th. Yeah, Creative Capital is a super competitive one. I wouldn't discourage anyone from applying, but it's a tough one to get through. And you should look at what artists have won. That's one of the best ways, by the way, to look at what whether you think you're a good fit for an organization. That's as big as Creative Capital. They give out a $10,000 grant and also support with some different things, but super competitive. So what that means is look at the level of artists that are getting in there. You know, look at past recipients. Look at how past recipients described their work. That's you'll get a feel from it right away, the kind of artists they're looking for. And it's different in every nonprofit, you know, the kind of artists they're looking for, the level of artists they're at. And anybody can apply to any of these, but just they all have a kind of a sensibility, if you will, you know, and Creative Capital has a certain sensibility that they're also looking for. Which again you can find by just looking at the past recipients, and Antonia, and seeing what's there. Q, Kathleen, I believe they are open. I believe they're a nonprofit as well. There's tons in New York. Yeah, there's tons. And if you didn't know, you could type in Q Foundation, right? Because Q is a foundation, which means most likely they are a nonprofit. Just type in Q Foundation, look them up, and see what's happening there. So yeah, don't hesitate to ask more questions in this thread, and don't hesitate to suggest topics that you'd like to see me make more recordings on. So again, I want to welcome everybody here. You guys are a great tribe, a great group. It's most exciting thing to me is to see support of one another. It's pretty easy to be isolated as an artist, and even if you're in a community, because everyone has such a different vision about what they're doing. So great to see people commenting on other people's posts and what they're doing. I think that's so helpful, and is the meaning of a community to me. So welcome here, everybody. Again, great to see you. I'll be seeing you every week or more. And again, if you have any questions, you can post more here. And uh, and also, if you have any suggestions for topics for me to talk on, don't hesitate to tell me those topics. So have a wonderful day or evening, everyone, wherever you are, and talk to you soon.